All right, welcome back everybody. Thank you for coming out to our panel this afternoon. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, our afternoon panel is from NORAD NORTHCOM. Their experts will be sharing their views on convergence with us in a little bit. Our host for today and the organizer for the panel is the Director of Operations for NORAD NORTHCOM, General Hike. Unfortunately, as you can imagine, during a pandemic, the Director of Operations for Homeland Defense is probably a fairly busy person. So unfortunately, General Hike was called away for TDY, but he was kind enough to record a few words for us for introduction for the panel. And so I'm going to ask the folks here to go ahead and play that recording, and then I'll introduce today's moderator after that and turn it over to the panel. So gentlemen, if we could please roll the tape.
Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to speak today. On behalf of our two commands, I'd like to welcome you virtually to United States Northern Command and North American Aerospace Defense Command right here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. I'm Major General Kevin Hike, the NORTHCOM J3 Director of Operations. A sincere thanks to you, the AFCEA Rocky Mountain Chapter, for inviting our panel from NORAD and NORTHCOM to speak at this year's Cyberspace Symposium. This forum is a great opportunity for us to interact with one another as a community of professionals focused on the issues that impact the security of our nations. And I look forward to how we can become an effective and even more agile fighting force. I'll introduce the complex environment that we operate in every day and highlight a few focus areas for NORAD and NORTHCOM. Then I'll hand it over to the great panel we have assembled for their remarks and some questions and answers. Our commander has been clear to highlight that the future fight will be won or lost based on our ability to achieve persistent all-domain awareness, information dominance, and decision superiority. And we must deter in competition, de-escalate in crisis, and if required, deny and defeat attacks on our nations. And as the world evolves, we see new challenges are constantly emerging every day. And this is critical for us to understand the strategic environment that we are operating in. We're constantly working to address these challenges, and we are keenly focused on adapting to assure our homeland defense. The world today is defined by an increasingly connected global community, rapid technology development, and aggressive competitors that seek to hold the United States, as well as our international allies and our closest partners at risk across all domains. Over the past 20 years, while the U.S. has focused on fighting forward, our competitors have developed capabilities and rapidly advanced. Whether the threat comes from Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, violent extremist organizations, transnational criminal organizations, national emergencies, or even global pandemics, we see that our homeland is no longer a sanctuary. NORAD and NORTHCOM are evolving our approach to a global perspective so that every strategy, operational plan, and budget decision must reflect that. We must ensure that our forces are prepared to address everything from symmetric to asymmetric threats to local, regional, or national crises that could threaten the security and stability of our nations. We have worked diligently to enhance our existing capabilities across all of those domains. And as our competitors' capabilities continue to improve, NORAD and NORTHCOM require timely and accurate information across all domains to counter their malign influence and actions. To achieve this all-domain awareness, we are investing in updating our systems, developing new systems to meet current and future threats, and ensuring the inclusion of existing systems and civilian platforms to create a layered sensing grid that provides persistent and complete battle space awareness. We are working towards joint all-domain command and control concepts and to ensure we control and dominate in the information space. It's essential to advance capabilities and systems that ingest, aggregate, process, display, and then disseminate data at the speed of relevance using artificial intelligence and machine learning. With this data, we can message, set our posture, and create options at all levels in order to disrupt our competitors' decision cycles and to achieve decision superiority. NORAD and NORTHCOM have embraced that theme and are leading the way with projects like our Pathfinder, We've built a data architecture and successfully integrated air domain information from various sensors, leveraging machine learning and automation tools that reduce human workload and give us a common picture for decision superiority. Our global information dominance exercises, or we call GUIDE, are bringing cross-combatant command collaboration to generate globally integrated effects using artificial intelligence-enabled information. Our series of GUIDE experiments are technology risk reduction events and complement a shift in focus from pure defeat mechanisms towards earlier deterrent deny actions well left of any kinetic activity. GUIDE experiments also spur faster decisions and provide proactive options by making new technologies more accessible and more effective. You'll hear more specifics shortly from the panel as we aim to validate real-time coordination and collaboration at the operational level across geographic combatant command boundaries, and then demonstrate how quickly we can leverage artificial intelligence and machine learning to enable that decision superiority. When it comes to homeland defense, NORAD and NORTHCOM is a very demanding customer, and we're leading the way in achieving irreversible momentum and showing enormous value and capability that JADC2 will bring. It will enable us to deter and deny in daily competition, de-escalate in crisis, and yes, defeat in conflict. But to be clear, we do not see JADC2 as only focused on the defeat portion of the end game of the kill chain. It's extremely important, however, the real value in JADC2 data-centric capabilities is in deterrence and denial. When we can close the information gap and enable decision space, we can then operate inside a competitor's decision cycle. And that has great effect, from the tactical to the strategic level, across all of our domains. We are already seeing that when we can achieve domain awareness by moving far left of this traditional kill chain, we can achieve information convergence that allows us time to decide and act in competition, crisis, and conflict if required. It sounds easy, but I know it's not. JADC2 is an essential framework for success, and we need your help, industry's help, to find creative and innovative solutions. The enablers of a future fight must solve data security and access on agile and adaptable infrastructure that is able to operate across many security levels while blending interoperable data feeds. We must ensure transparency is required to improve user confidence. NORAD and NORTHCOM continue to work with our fellow combatant commands, the services, and our innovative industry leaders to develop capabilities faster than our competitors. Success in the future fight depends on it, and accurate information flow across all domains will bring us decision superiority. So to close, we must continue to find ways to leverage and process data quickly, using machine learning and artificial intelligence to integrate capabilities to a decisive advantage. The more we know about our battle space and the more warning time we have, the faster we can adjust, posture, or react. Doing so presents complex dilemmas to our adversaries who recognize that we have information dominance and decision superiority. NORAD and NORTHCOM are working to bring global sensor data to the warfighter even faster, and we're agnostic to the platform. It takes flattened data architecture with data standards to enable sharing at all security levels. From across the battle space to the most senior levels of strategic decision-making, we must continue to work so our systems also enable our partners and allies to participate. And that will be our strength to deter, deny, and defend. I'll now pass the lead over to the panel here at NORAD and NORTHCOM, our leaders and experts who are ready to give you a sense of how we must continually improve our layered network of sensors, a grid of shared awareness, and with information from below the surface to on orbit, through cyberspace and linked with advanced capabilities to deny and defeat threats, the power of convergence to win is in our future. Thank you.
Okay. Our thanks to General Hike for those kind words. It's unfortunate that he couldn't be here with us today, but a lot of work goes into setting up one of these panels even before showtime here, and we appreciate him putting in all that effort to arrange today's today's session for us. Just a reminder before I transfer over to the panel that at the lower end right-hand side of your screen you have the Ask button. Please feed your questions for the panel in there. Our staff will gather those up, pass them to the panel when we reach the Q&A period. So our moderator for today is General Hike's Deputy of Operations for Headquarters Northern Command, Brigadier General Paul Moga. General Moga brings an extensive resume of operational experience. You can click through to the program and read his bio. Very impressive list of experience he brings for us here today, including a previous assignment as Chief of Strategic Planning and Integration at Headquarters Air Force. So very relevant to the conversation here, and I'm sure will be a very welcome addition and a perspective to today's discussion. So without any further ado, General Moga, let me turn it over to you and the panel.
Okay, thanks. Well, first of all, good afternoon, everybody. Brigadier General Max Moga from the NORTHCOM J3. I'm one of General Hike's Deputy Directors for Operations. It's a real pleasure to be able to participate in this event. And thank you for the invitation on behalf of all the panel members to continue our collaboration with our industry partners. As you heard from Major General Hike's opening comments, NORAD and NORTHCOM are fundamentally changing the way we approach homeland and continental defense. And why, to be quite honest, it's because our competitors have changed their approaches, their activities, their operations, and their investments. So we have to adjust accordingly to maintain the operational and the strategic and the tactical advantage. And what that really drives is a culture change requirement inside of NORAD and NORTHCOM for both of our commands. And it's a change driven by innovation. And I'll acknowledge up front that innovation is probably one of the most overused words, at least in the Department of Defense. So when I personally think about change driven through innovation, I didn't come up with this on my own. I read it in a book somewhere. I really think of achieving the desired effect or improvement by a factor of 10. Specifically for us, time, money, and people with regards to meeting our operational homeland defense requirements. So what you'll hear from some of the panelists today is, can we ingest 10 times the amount of data? Can we turn that data into information that is ready for senior leaders to make decisions based upon 10 times faster? Can we do it with 2 people when we used to require 20? And I think the answer to both of those is yes. We're not there yet, but we're certainly on our way. And the last one, can we do it 10 times cheaper? That's probably the $100 million question that we don't have an answer to quite yet. It's clearly going to require some upfront investment, but I think in the long term, we'll find a lot of fiscal efficiencies with our initiatives and our work going forward. So I'll stop there and we'll get into the panels and the presenters. We got a great lineup of speakers today from across multiple different sections of the staff. Rear Admiral Cheever, underachiever. He's our NORAD NORTHCOM J5 for a Navy fighter pilot. He's pretty awesome. We've also got Colonel Matt Elberhardt from the Commander's Action Group, and as well as the Homeland Defense cross-functional team, and then Colonel Nomad Sturmeyer, deeply ingrained in the Homeland Defense cross-functional team. The last two are really I would say the ninja level experts on what we've been working on for going on over a year. And with that, I'll pause and I'll hand it off to Admiral Cheever first. Sir, over to you.
Thanks much, Max. It's been a long time since I've been called awesome. So I'm gonna tell my kids tonight I got called awesome today. Thanks for having us. Thanks to the FCF folks. The Rocky Mountain chapter might be the coolest name of a chapter, period. So that's pretty awesome. And I'll tell you, there's nothing more critical than cyber. We live in really exciting times, and cyber is the most exciting domain and the scariest domain all at the same time. I'm reading the 5th domain right now. So lots of hope, but lots of scary in there. And I know you all know way more than that about cyber and that kind of stuff than I do. I think the last time I did real in-depth cyber stuff was walking across the quad with my Fortran cards for my final project, that you put them through Max, you probably don't even remember this. You put them through the machine and it, if you do it right, it comes out with a coded thing that you can actually get an answer out of the machine. And then right after I graduated, I discovered there was a company called Apple making computers and stuff like that that were like small and easy to use. So with that said, here at NORAD NORTHCOM, we're really excited. General Van Herk, like Max talked about, is completely leading a cultural change in the way we think. It's a globally integrated way we think, and there's nothing more globally integrated than cyber. And it's really a whole of society in cyber, in my mind. It's a whole of society, whole of nations to maintain the international rules-based orders where we're at. We have our strategy. So signed yesterday, there's our in-class strategy. And in there is the NORAD mission, which is conduct aerospace warning, airspace control, maritime warning, defense in North America with our incredible partner and ally, Canada. They're phenomenal. And my deputy is a Canadian one-star submariner, Jamie, who's just phenomenal. And then our NORTHCOM mission is defend our homeland, deter, detect, deny, and defeat threats to the United States, conduct security cooperation activities with Bahamas, Mexico, Canada, and allies and partners, and support civil authorities, which the J3 and Maxon team do so well in executing anything from wildfires to hurricanes to COVID support. Our vision is to outpace global competitors, deter adversaries, deny, defeat threats through what Fumez talked about, which is our strategic principles: all domain awareness, information dominance, decision superiority, and global integration. And that's what we're getting after here. The enduring conditions are the homelands defended, US and Canada outpace competitors, US and Canada national security in North America is enhanced, and then civil authorities are supported. One of the most important things to understand about NORAD, especially NORTHCOM, is most of the time we are operating in support of a lead federal agency. Some other agency who needs support from DoD request it, and then we staff it and make sure that we have the right support level to that lead federal agency. And that's a key piece of who we are and what we do. We are the Arctic advocate, by the way. And if you talk about cyber and communications and things like that in the Arctic, it is truly an austere environment. It is, and if I can borrow some words from a friend of mine, it's warming, but it's not warm. It's opening, but it's not open. So there's a lot of potential up there and a lot of effort. I will say that the J5 is the NORAD NORTHCOM Women Peace Security Initiative lead. And so we're really excited about that. And that our partners and allies are equally excited about that. And I think that effort is going to take us a long way into the future. Let's see, a couple last things. You know, I'm reading the news just like everybody else. Advanced persistent threats are they're not cool, they're annoying, and they're dangerous, and it's really bad stuff. And then the disinformation campaign, I can't think of anything more evil than try to sow disinformation during a pandemic, especially regarding the vaccines and efforts that are ongoing, good faith efforts by our nations to get after this thing and end the pandemic. So that one ticks me off. And for COVID, we led the effort for the Global Integrated Framework for Pandemic Infectious Disease and a functional campaign plan, which is awesome. And then the other thing we're working on is transnational criminal organizations to make sure that that international rules-based order is solidified, bad actors are minimized and kept out of the mainstream, if you will. With that said, I look forward to any questions or that kind of stuff. Remember, I'm just a basic naval aviator, F-18 guy. So, you know, basic questions. I'm kind of the John Madden of J5s. I say a lot of obvious things. And then the expert team of about 200 people that actually do all the planning, strategy, and policy stuff for us is awesome. With that said, I think that's my time. So Max, thanks very much for teeing this up. Appreciate Fumez and the team. I really look forward to the Q&A. Over.
Okay, thanks, sir. And we know that you might not be able to hang online based on a commitment with the acting Secretary of the Air Force coming up, but we'll see if you're around towards the end when we get to Q&A. So Similar to you, I'm a digital immigrant stuck in customs. But I'll introduce two people that are the absolute opposite of that, being Colonel Matt Eberhardt and Colonel Nomad Strohmeyer. So with that, Matt, I know you're up and ready to go, so over to you.
Great, thank you much, sir. And Nomad, if you just start pushing your slides, let everybody know, hello, thanks for the introduction. If you're looking at me on the screen and you see that red star behind me, I am not captured by Red China. I'm out here spreading the Homeland Defense gospel in DC, and this happens to be the confines of my hotel room. So get to talk to two related audiences today. Talk to the DHS ops devs today, and now we're talking to cyber folks, both of which have a lot of key play in understanding the new threat environment and how all of us need to work together to overcome some of these challenges. You'll notice the title on this brief that we have here is a truncated version of a larger and more classified brief, but it's called Global Perspective because that's the commander's focus. You're going to see as we go through this why we see a need for that shift in focus and why the global nature of it is really center of the way we're thinking. With that, we'll go on to the next slide, which goes over our two mission statements that Admiral Cheever just talked about for our two commands. You put those on there, and it's just a reminder that of where we come from and what our purpose is. And if you look at both of those, the common linkage between them is homeland or continental defense between those two commands. However, the way we think about that today is very different than what it was 10, 15 years ago. At that point, our two commands had either stood up to deal with the VEO threat and prevent another 9/11, or had recalibrated in the case of NORAD to be able to address that threat. And in that time that's evolved since then, as we've been focused on the overseas fight, our adversaries have changed their approach to us and made it where today we look at those mission statements and we realize that there's a lot more that we need to do in order to successfully fulfill those obligations in a future fight. So with that, we can start by looking at what used to be the old operating model, if you will. And that is that the U.S. could decide when and where it would apply military force pretty much on its own. We had the homeland as a sanctuary. We would mobilize from a secure homeland, deploy, and fight forward on our own terms. We were afforded that luxury basically during the entire time of all of our lives that we've been working and living in the military here. However, recently, a lot of that has changed as we've been focused in on those VEOs and terrorist organizations, particularly as it pertains to our peer competitors in Russia and China. First and foremost, they have advanced their cyber capabilities to not only operate in wartime, potential for cyber exploitation, cyber attack, but also in peacetime, as they've demonstrated. Everybody in this symposium would be well aware. As they've watched us deploy and fight forward, they have figured out ways, both doctrinally and in capability development, in order to change the calculus for them and for us. And that includes not only the cyber or the information ops, which all of us may be so familiar with, but also counter space capabilities, places where they think they have an advantage, but also importantly in the kinetic realm as well, which a lot of people don't realize. And that has to do with long-range delivery platforms that have either been developed or modified since the Cold War, and in the weapon systems that they employ, giving them much greater range, precision, speed, and stealth across multiple domains. So if you go to the next slide, we can talk about how that changing security environment has impacted us. And we first start with China. 15 years ago, if we looked at the Chinese, they basically, all they had was a strategic deterrent in their 18 silo-based strategic nuclear missiles. But at the time, we really called those targets. That wasn't much of a deterrent at all. So what they've done is invested a great amount of capability in road mobile ICMs, new categories of submarines that can actually threaten us in their near abroad. Of course, they're some of the most brazen cyber actors, counter space actors, shooting down the satellite almost a decade ago. And now they've been advancing much greater hypersonic capabilities and things like that can threaten our air defenses as well. Moving on to the second piece, we can look at the rogue nations that are out there and the threats that they pose with North Korea and China. 15 years ago, neither one of those could hold us at risk. And now today, if you look at someone like North Korea, They have detonated a thermonuclear bomb as well as successfully tested ICBMs. So when you put those two things together, that's a feat that only the 5 permanent members of the National Security Council have been able to do. And of course, both of these actors have demonstrated their ability to operate in the cyber domain offensively and exploitative fashion, both inside peacetime and out. Perhaps no other threat out there, though, has caused us to alter our thinking more than has Russia. 15 years ago, the Russians really were coming out of the post-Soviet doldrums, really trying to get back on their feet again after their nuclear triad had been aging. And during this here recent time, they have made improvements to those delivery platforms, invented a completely new severed vinge submarine, which is quiet by even Western standards. And they have developed cruise missile capabilities that add dramatically to that range and precision that we saw before. Not only that, they've fielded the first set of hypersonic glide vehicles, which of course is a nuclear threat, and they have demonstrated their anti-satellite counter space capabilities as well as their cyber proficiency, as all of us are well aware of at this point. But maybe more than anything that Russia has done, it's a combination of thinking along with actions that helps us understand their potential intent, particularly as it pertains to a pending crisis in their near abroad. And that is, we don't expect them to be able to carry out some of these attacks on an out of the blue type of attack. But what they do expect us to do is to press the advantage if there's a conflict along their periphery where they think that we might be wanting to press the advantage if we were to get involved. And in that case, what they've done is they've developed different doctrines to be able to add other options to them to be able to counter us. And of course, we know how active they are in the information environment realm as well as in the cyber. We also know that they have developed and maintained a strategic nuclear deterrent, even during the waning years after the Cold War. But what they've really invested a lot of money and energy on is the middle rungs of their deterrent strategy, which is really both non-kinetic and kinetic forms of attack that can reach out and touch us across the globe. And we've seen that play out here in recent years where they've been much more active and complex in the capabilities that they've been demonstrating. And anybody who's familiar with more higher classification levels will know that this is a real threat. Go on to the next slide. That helps us try to understand what it means to have a global perspective. The anecdote we're going to give you right now shifts away from Russia here real quick, and it focuses in on China. What you see there is the South China Sea. NORAD Strohmeyer, who's about to speak here in a few minutes, he was with me representing NORAD and NORTHCOM at a recent tabletop exercise / war game. And in that, the scenario that we were given was just this right here, South China Sea, and we were given the different sets of objectives for how to keep China from moving forces onto certain islands, giving us different target sets that we must hit, et cetera, et cetera. And as we were working through that challenge, we were actually thinking of it in the same way that the Chinese might, a game of Go. And when you think about Go is about, understanding the space that you're given, filling that space and maintaining leverage, gaining leverage over the adversary. As we thought through the scenario and what China had there and what we had there, we realized really quickly that this was a rigged game. There was no way to win given this type of approach to that problem set. And the answer was really in expanding the board, much like those that might be familiar with different operational concepts from DoD. The same way, we would expand the game board to identify different points of leverage across the globe. From the Chinese, we could look and could build that next one, at their developments that they have in Djibouti or other economic places that they have an advantage. Different areas to maintain and gain and maintain leverage outside of the board, a theater to which we might be unnecessarily constrained. If you think about that, that's how we were thinking about from an offensive perspective, trying to fight that fight. But really, that is right there what precisely the Russians and the Chinese have been doing to us. They have understood the challenge that we pose to them, both from a nuclear perspective, but as well as conventional. And they've developed the capabilities in anti-denial, anti-access along their periphery. But what we've focused on here today is what they've done outside of that, identifying the capabilities that they need to be able to hold us at risk at home as part of a broader fight in order to change that calculus, both for them and for us from a deterrence and homeland defense perspective. If we go to the next one, we can look at what we are trying to do at NORAD and NORTHCOM to try to have the capabilities that we need to be able to dominate globally. And just as General Moga and General Hike were talking about, these are the critical capabilities and associated requirements that we need for that global fight. And General Van Herk would say, not only him, he's trying to lead abreast with other combatant commands to be able to develop these capabilities so that they are seamless across combatant commands and our allied forces. And it really all starts with domain awareness. When we talk about that, what we're talking about is a persistent all domain awareness layered sensing grid that goes from our subsurface sensors out on the oceans all the way up to our on-orbit sensors and cyberspace. And the important thing here is not in investing necessarily in a lot of bespoke solutions from a sensor standpoint, but opening up existing data, existing sensor feeds and reporting streams into the same open data architecture so that that can be used. And that includes with people like I talked to this morning over at DHS, and so other agencies that would to play in this overall all domain picture. Once that data is accessible, it then has to be used. And that's where we talk about information dominance. This is where we unleash the power of machine learning and artificial intelligence to speed that processing up so that it can be more usable for decision makers. We can free up analysts to be able to do higher order processing and let machines do that work, much like General Moga talked about, doing more with less. The key point here is to come up with decision quality data. And that's where we get over to decision superiority. When we talk about that, we're talking about making decisions faster and better than the would-be adversary, so that we aren't operating just in that defeat space once a weapon is launched and off the rails, trying to interdict it. We're able to act earlier to take proactive measures to be able to deter them earlier in the conflict continuum. We'll take a look at how that plays out here on this next slide. This slide right here is really the operative logic to General Van Herk's strategy. If you start building this out one way, if you look at this continuum for conflict that goes across the bottom of the box here, the traditional DoD emphasis has been on the defeat capability. This is your Patriot missile batteries, your F-22s, F-35s, associated radar and tanker support that's required to be able to be on station, to be able to shoot down one of these missiles once it's off the rails. However, those are the same capabilities that are required for the forward fight, which leads to resource contestation between us and other combatant commands. In addition, modern warfare has changed significantly. When we talk about the advanced capabilities that the Russians today and the Chinese tomorrow have in those weapon systems and the greater reach that they have, you have much greater complexity conflict. That is with speed, with precision, with standoff and cross-domain threats that are coming at us. And so what that leaves is in that lower right-hand quadrant here, that's a pretty tough physics problem in order to gain leverage. General Van Herk's answer to that is to place the emphasis in our capability development elsewhere, out in that domain awareness and information dominant space. At that point, we can be able to act earlier, just as I said, out in competition, and then de-escalate in crisis if necessary, all the way from the tactical to the strategic, unleashing in a completely different set of options that our senior leaders today are able to deal with. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to NOMAD Strohmeyer to talk about what we're doing to be able to actually make that a reality.
Great, thanks, Matt, and thanks to General Moga, Admiral Cheever, and really to FKIA for allowing us to be able to present today. I'm Colonel NOMAD Strohmeyer. I work in the NORTHCOM J8 as the JADC2 development lead. And what I'd like to walk you through is the next tangible level below what Admiral Cheever and what Matt just talked about when it comes to what is NORAD and NORTHCOM, what are we doing to get after these problems, and moving off of PowerPoint slides and out into the real world to develop out systems that can enable us to meet General Van Herk's vision for information dominance and decision superiority and global integration. And so what I'll walk through in the next couple slides and a few videos is some of the tangible ways that we are getting after this. Now, it's important to note that we don't think we have all the right answers, but what we do know is we are close to the operational requirement. We feel it every day, the need to develop these capabilities. And so while we're working with the services to continue developing these capabilities, we saw that the need was great enough that we had to move out on our own in partnership with several other DoD agencies to make these capabilities a reality. So behind the scenes, like if you go underneath the hood for our information dominance ideas, is what we refer to as our JADC2, or Joint All-Domain Command and Control concept, the tangible way that we're getting after it. And for us at NORAD and NORTHCOM, it's all about data. Getting data from any location, any source, whether it's a sensor or whether it's a shooter, and pulling that data together. Now, when we talk about data, we're referring primarily to what we refer to as authoritative data. We mean raw data that comes from a sensor. If this is a FAA radar or a North Warning System radar that we may use for homeland defense detection, rather than using the legacy process data with an algorithm that was built in the 1980s that drops 97% of the data that's coming off that radar on the floor, instead going to that authoritative source of that sensor and pulling the raw data off that sensor. It also may be authoritative data that's coming from deployed forces, whether or not we've maybe stood up an agile combat employment field up in northern Canada or Alaska for additional defense capabilities, taking that deployed force and getting the data from them on what their situation is, what their readiness stat is. And rather than reporting that data through legacy processes like telephone games and emails and PowerPoint slides, instead getting live data streams coming from that deployed force. And that same authoritative data story is similar when it comes to how we would think about the away game fight and getting data from sensors and shooters that come from the source rather than from legacy processing. And then we take that data, that authoritative data, across each one of the domains that we deal with at NORAD and NORTHCOM, and we put it up into the cloud. And we put it into secure cloud enclaves that allow us at several different classification levels to not have that data resting on premises at one location where you have to have a proprietary user terminal to access that data, but instead having our data across all those different authoritative sources integrated at the cloud level so that it's accessible at any command echelon. So whether you are the USNORTHCOM commander or whether or not you are a deployed force that's forward at Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson for Homeland Defense, that you have access to that data. But once we get all that data together, we need to be able to access it and get it in front of decision makers better and faster than we've been able to do in the past. To do that, we produce all domain decision tools. You may have heard of this previously referred to as a common operating picture. We mean to go beyond just a common operating picture and allow us to use that data better so that if you have feeds, as Matt talked about, coming in from subsurface all the way to geosynchronous orbit, that information is collated and presented to you as a decision maker in a way that intuitively allows you to see the battle space and decide how you can act in that battle space. But it also allows you to be able to see the world globally. We're not just looking at the NORAD and NORTHCOM AOR. We're seeing it globally, how competitors and adversaries are moving, so we can get a better global understanding about how they're trying to hold us at risk. Well, that three-step process of data, cloud, to decision tools is a huge step forward for the department. But what we mean to do at NORAD and NORTHCOM is add a fourth step in the middle, and this is machines. And as Matt mentioned, we really believe that it's machines and unlocking the power of machines and processing power and artificial intelligence and machine learning to get us better and faster insights. One thing we've realized that as we have begun the process of integrating all of those data sources together, it becomes overwhelming for a human to process all that information. So our first step for machines is just allowing them to process the data for us faster, to curate the data and pull out of it the things that are important to humans. But the next level for us is to get to a level of machine learning, where we can take things such as satellite imagery that we take across the entire globe every day and allow machines to process that satellite imagery and identify things like vehicles and aircraft and surface combatant vessels, and allow the machines to identify them, count them, and then not only count them for that one satellite image, but then go to the next level to start getting an understanding of the pattern of life of an adversary across the battle space. What is the normal amount of vehicles that they have at different operating locations, so that when there's a significant change in that pattern of life, well prior to them actually loading bombers or fueling aircraft, that we start to see a change in that pattern of life days in advance of where we were able to identify it in the past. Now, that doesn't mean we perfectly understand adversary intent, but it can help us to be able to focus our collect on some of those locations to gain an earlier understanding of their intent. And so it's this four-step process of data, cloud, machine to decision tools that is under the hood when it comes to NORAD and NORTHCOM's, not only our JADC2 concept, but really more broadly, our ideas for information dominance and eventually decision superiority. So what would that look like if we play that out in a notional scenario, using that kind of four-step process and then applying of the three critical requirements that we have of domain awareness, information dominance, and decision superiority? Let's assume notionally that in the competition phase or in heightened tensions, as we might be approaching crisis with a peer level competitor, that our AI detects for example, all the different bombers that are located at each one of the adversary bomber bases multiple times per day. And that AI suddenly senses a significant increase in the number of bombers at a forward operating location. And that significant increase in the number of bombers at that location could be indicative of that competitor getting ready to take an unwanted action against the US and Canada. Well, it's that earlier indication and warning before they actually take off that can allow us to get together with the other combatant commands in the same cloud-enabled data environment and allow us to collaborate not in our geographic combatant command stovepipes, but instead to collaborate globally and look at what is this competitor doing based on what we see at this one operating location and across their battle space. What is a potential ECOA or enemy course of action that they may be considering? They haven't executed it yet, but what does Transcom and Spacecom and Stratcom and Northcom think about what's going on? And we think that with these new cloud-enabled tools, it can allow us to collaborate more quickly than we've been able to do in the past and gain more of a globally integrated understanding about what adversaries are doing, or competitors are doing across the battle space. That ECOA development, that collaborative cross-combatant command ECOA development, can then lead into the same combatant commands coming together. And instead of looking at what kind of response options might I have only in my combatant commands AOR, instead looking across all of the combatant commands globally and collaborating together on what might we do proactively to try to deter this competitor from taking this action, or deter this adversary in crisis from taking this action. And it might be a cross-combatant command movement of forces that, because we all have access to this common cloud-enabled data set, we can collaborate and move those forces even before this competitor or adversary takes their action. And that cross-combatant command collaboration and movement of forces, combined with unambiguous messaging, that not only are we well aware of what the adversary is doing, that we are so globally integrated that we can take an action to deter them well prior to their action. That's essentially getting to the heart of decision superiority, getting inside, as General Hike said, inside the adversary's decision cycle, complicating their decisions, presenting them with multiple dilemmas that get them off their game, that cause them to step back and take pause in what they're doing, and ultimately to deter them. Those are the kind of things that NORAD and NORTHCOM is doing to try to be able to develop proactive options to deter in competition, deny in crisis, and when and if required, to defeat inside conflict. Well, that looks like a great PowerPoint slide. The reality is that we have built out these tools in partnership with several agencies like the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center, the JAIC, up at the OSD level, or working with OSD and INS, Project Maven. We have been developing out these capabilities with them and several other agencies over the course of the last 2 years. And we now have prototype tools that we are fielding at NORAD and NORTHCOM, not just for day-to-day operations, but for advanced experiments that we are conducting, like as General Moga mentioned, our Global Information Dominance Experiments, or GUIDE experiments, the first one of which occurred last December, where we had 4 combatant commands in the same common data environment that allowed us to be able to be presented with global indications and warnings, and then to rapidly collaborate a cross-combatant command response to try to deter that adversary. It was a very successful event where we showed what is in the art of the possible for these kind of tools that are being developed. Well, Guide 2, which is our next event planned for the end of this month, is going to have essentially every combatant command from both geographic and functional combatant commands presented over a course of a 4-day experiment, real world and exercise data and indications and warnings being presented to them about multiple peer level adversaries trying to take advantage of a global crisis, and in allowing us to be able to collaborate on a response that we can execute in the real world with real movements of forces. And so during this live fly experiment, we think that we are going to push the boundaries of what we really need when it comes to global integration and cross-combatant command collaboration. We have several tools that we've developed over the course of the last several months, working with many of those agencies up at the OSD level to be able to develop out capabilities. I'm going to give you just a quick snapshot of what some of those capabilities look like. This one, which is known as Cosmos, is that cross-combatant command collaboration tool. And as I play this video, you're going to see Cosmos in work, not once we've actually come up with an idea about how we might move forces, and this are all notional forces at the unclassified level, but how we might move forces globally from one notional location to another location, and in this case, across combatant command lines, but done in a way that allows us to immediately and live feasibility check whether or not the assets that we might use for that movement are available. In this case, you can see that we're going to be tied to live Air Force readiness data sets in partnership with Project Brown Heron. That's going to allow us to be able to see, as you can see in the center of the screen where it says resources, whether or not we have those aircraft that we believe we might move in this notional deterrence COA, whether or not those are actually available. And if we have, as you can see, there are 4 FMC or fully mission capable aircraft at that location, or whether or not there are aircraft or NMC or PMC at that location. We think that access to this kind of cloud-enabled data, this readiness data, and the ability to collaborate across combatant commands can allow us to be able to come up with feasibility checked COAs orders of magnitude faster than what we've been able to do in the past, and really allow us to be able to get inside those competitor decision cycles, inside competition and crisis. But if we find ourselves in a situation where we actually are in conflict or having to track actual threats, as General Hike mentioned, our Pathfinder program at a tactical level is now taking that raw data feeds off things like FAA and military radars, both across the US, Canada, Alaska, Guam, and Hawaii, and is applying machine learning to those raw feeds. And we're digging out amazing insights that we never thought those radars could detect in the past. And this is a live view that was recorded about a day ago of those different feeds that are coming in. A view that allows us to not only be able to see what are all those radars seeing that we didn't think they could see in the past, but then also what kind of assets do we have available? And whereas in the past, we had to rely on the operator's know-how, their experience to know where the different alert fields are and how much time it might take for us to respond against potentially a bomber or a cruise missile threat. And that operator would have to do the mental math on when they should launch and what the vector for the intercept might be. Contrast that with these programs that we're now developing, where you can look out into the operating environment. You can see in the environment where our asset lists are, where our the most critical defended asset lists are, and then you can develop a response that can allow us to be able to see the environment and then how we might best respond. And we have machines that are available to pair with a potential threat, but it's not machines that the human has tasked. It's machines that are always running in the background, developing the best course of action for how we might best intercept a potential threat. So in this case, as there is a potential air threat that was selected during this live demo that we did, that we have information on there that's being presented, such as what is the expected vector of that threat and their time that they will get to that location. But then the system, if we go to task asset, presents the best course of action that it thinks, that the machine thinks that we could apply, whether it's an aircraft in this case, and whether that aircraft would intercept, but it also has access to all the other potential intercept options that exist out there. And what this gets us at the tactical level is more decision space, more time for senior leaders to be able to make decisions about what to do inside an actual crisis or conflict, so that we have better joint force defensive response options for what we can do. But not only does it help out inside crisis and conflict, imagine what the next level of this capability is, where now you've not only worried about what do I do when that threat is actually over the continental United States or Canada, but what about the launch platform in the hours prior to that threat getting there? If I have machines that are giving me better options for tracking that launch platform, or for tracking that potential launch platform before it ever launched, and then giving me options for how we can task Blue Force assets to go investigate what is going on at that location, tasking ISR asset before that threat is actually launched, and what the fact that an ISR asset may arrive overhead or outside of that adversary area earlier than the adversary had anticipated before they actually launched. What does that do to deterrence? What does that do to the adversary commander's decision cycle and their understanding about how well they might affect their course of action? It's those kind of tools and those kind of capabilities that NORAD and NORTHCOM is developing out live. And as you can see, we have real tools that we are fielding right now during day-to-day operations and for our global information dominance experiments for the future. So with that, I'll pull down the slides and see and just kind of open it up for any discussion or questions that the audience might have for NORAD and USNORTHCOM.
Thanks, Nomad. So for the Q&A session, we've obviously got a little bit of time left. So we're looking forward to some good questions and some good dialogue back and forth. As mentioned earlier, I do not have the skills or the capability to read questions off of Zoom. So, however, the moderators up at the Broadmoor want to run it, we're standing by to answer questions.
Hey, sir, it's Rich. If you just open your chat window in Zoom, you'll see we have the first two questions loaded for your consideration.
Dude.
Okay, let me take myself off mute, open chat. So is this one from Ms. Johnson? Okay, I got him. First question, can you provide a high-level summary of persistent engagement on foreign networks? What considerations does the DoD need to balance when attempting to be proactive against adversaries attempting to attack DoD networks? That is a good question, and here's where we get into a bit of a policy. I don't want to say a conundrum. Clearly, the DoD is concerned and monitoring potential or imminent attacks on our networks, but when it comes to cyber defense at the national level, the Department of Homeland Security is actually the lead federal agency for offensive or defensive cyber operations. DoD is primarily responsible from a policy standpoint with protecting the infrastructure, but that takes a lot of partnership and communication and coordination with the federal lead, which is DHS, to make sure that we are aware, tracking, monitoring, and responsive to any attacks or imminent attacks against our networks. We can't go into a whole lot more details on an unclassified BTC, but I'll pause there for a second and see if Matt or Nomad have anything else to add from a cyber standpoint.
Sir, I would just add that certainly our J6 is very involved in this and is really leaning forward in how they think about as we aggregate our data on the cloud and create new access to information for the Blue Force. We are also thinking and working closely with Cybercom and others to think rightly about how we do this, how we go about this large paradigm shift on migrating a lot of our information to the cloud. And we're taking a lot of our cues from industry and the best practices that they have. Because if you think about things like the global financial networks that currently operate very much in the same way on the cloud and how they think about securing their information. So we're working both with industry and with our government experts like at Cybercom to make sure that we're building this out rightly and that we're getting feedback from them and adjusting our approach as we go.
Okay, hopefully that at least gets after a little bit of that question and correct Nomads. We kind of take some of our cues from Cybercom through our J6 to make sure that we're tracking and monitoring all potential or certainly imminent attacks. And you all have read the national news over the last couple of months with regards to certain incidents that have happened, not only on civilian or national networks with malware, but also potentially affecting DoD networks. Thankfully, the last one, we got away pretty clean on that one from the DoD network standpoint. So, okay, next question. What are you doing in your organization top down to ensure that not only the usage of intelligent automation, but also the cradle to grave acquisition, research and development processes are constantly keeping ethics and safety in mind? I'll defer that one a little bit to Matt and to Nomad, but it is something that we consistently have to track and monitor. Obviously, sometimes when you go fast and you move rapidly, things have the tendency to sometimes slip through the cracks with how we work our contracting and how we work the monitoring of our contracts. It is certainly something that we always keep in mind, but as far as a top-down approach, I'll go over to Matt and to Nomad with regards to what specific actions they've been in coordination with our J6 to track that issue.
Sure, thanks. I'll open up just real quick because I know that Nomad will have something to add. I'll say this, just as you just said, sir, just because we go fast doesn't mean we get to work our way around obstacles that can and should be there. And this is a perfect example of that. We work with folks that are developing capabilities. They have some restraints on their side, whether that's companies, et cetera. They don't want to operate in unethical ways that come back to haunt them. But just last summer, as we were developing the first iteration of this for consideration, sort of proof of concept stuff, and we were briefing it up through in the Pentagon to the CAPE folks, the people that are going to be approving the sorts of capabilities that are going to be developed. They were asking all sorts of these questions, and everybody was pointing out that all of those hurdles that exist in the bureaucracy to ensure those standards are in place, all of those remain there, even with programs that are operating faster than usual. And so with that, I'll just say with that emphasis, it is there. I'll hand it over to Nomad.
Great. Thanks, Matt. So I would say that there's two maybe answers to the question of ethics, if I understand the question properly. And the first one, when it comes to the question of speed and doing this, in addition to us engaging the normal JROCM process of how we do this, that we're just not developing and delivering capability at the speed that it's needed. And that's now been a pretty consistent signal coming from NORAD and NORTHCOM. And so what we've discovered over the last couple of years is that Congress has given authority for several new ways to be able to engage, such as small business innovative research contracts that allow us to be able to work with small companies and to provide still competitive source selection and come up with ways to take small companies and develop out these capabilities rapidly. Some of them that we worked with for developing out some of those capabilities that you just saw there. And so we are recognizing the need to use some of those new authorities that Congress has vested the Department of Defense to be able to do. The second part of that ethics question, though, is maybe the use of artificial intelligence and machines to help us do some of this processing, and that is something to think about, certainly when it comes to what level of autonomy do we give machines. And the way that we have currently been approaching it, NORAD, NORTHCOM, is machines do not make any decisions, and nor in the near future will be making any decisions. What machines are doing for us is giving us better curated information than we've had in the past. So they are presenting options to humans that in the past, it required a human with a calculator to go through and try to figure out that option. Now machines are presenting options to humans, and then humans are helping to make those decisions and hopefully make them better than we have in the past. And my final point on that would be that we also know that we don't have all the right answers on this. So we are working with some of the best in government on these kind of questions. So we're working closely with the Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. We're working closely with USDI and Project Maven, and then some other governmental agencies like NGA and others that are also in this space, so that we can learn how we do this properly. So we're definitely taking our cues from OSD and the Joint Staff as we develop out these capabilities. Hopefully that helps answer the question.
Okay, let me get to another couple that are not identical, but related with regards to the Joint Cyberspace Warfighting Architecture and whether JADC2 is live. First, I think it's important to note that from a JADC2 standpoint, because lexicons and acronyms do matter. The overall departmental lead, if you will, for JADC2 development is resident inside of the Joint Staff with their Joint Staff cross-functional team. So they have pulled in multiple resources, multiple agencies, multiple efforts through from across right now the Joint Staff to include coordination with the services, because to be honest, all the services are at different points in their development, and they're developing different things, which is a challenge. It's an acknowledged challenge, but that's one of the reasons why NORAD and NORTHCOM has kind of taken the lead on moving this initiative forward. So my understanding is the Joint Cyberspace Warfighting Architecture is part of the JADC2 CFT, and Matt or Nomad, you can absolutely correct me if I'm off base on that one. And then as far as whether or not JADC2 is live, it is alive, but I would say it is still very much so in its infancy. It has just been within the last 8 months to a year that the Joint Staff and the services have really started pouring fuel on this fire, if you will. And like I alluded to earlier, all the services are at a different stage in their development, and they're all using different acronyms, right? The Air Force uses ABMS, the Army uses Project Convergence. The Navy uses, I think, Project Overwatch, but I can't exactly remember what their terminology is for their equivalent of their JADC2 contribution. So not to bog down on a discussion with regards to acronyms and lexicons, but it was a very deliberate decision by NORAD and NORTHCOM about 6 months ago to move away from specifically only using JADC2 or ABMS, to bring the conversation and the efforts and the initiatives to a joint COCOM level, and remind the joint staff and the other services that they can, for the most part, refer to it however they want, but NORAD and NORTHCOM are the customer. We are a demanding customer, and we have our requirements. And to a certain extent, we don't necessarily care what they decide to call it, but they all merge at some point inside of the Joint Staff CFT, who's kind of a clearinghouse for most of the JADC2 efforts moving forward. But because the Joint Staff isn't the COCOM, we felt the need to not necessarily go our own way, but set ourselves on a path that we think will meet our requirements, and they are not always perfectly aligned with the timeline and the efforts with the joint staff. But the good news is that there's constant collaboration, communication going on between the COCOM and the joint staff, and over time, this will get better. So JADC2, I wouldn't say that it's live, but it's probably more live than anywhere else inside of NORAD and NORTHCOM, because I think we got a little bit of jump on some of the services and some of the COCOMs with regards to our quote unquote guide initiative moving forward. So the good news is that over the last few months, as we continue to host these guide events, every single other combatant command is fully on board and participating and supporting and collaborating moving forward. So over time, this will, in my estimation, only get better. And Matt or Nomad, if you just want to pipe in on this joint cyberspace warfighting architecture real quick before we move on to the next one, I'll kick it over to you guys.
Nomad, do you want to? I'll hit the first part that I want to hit first. So I just want to pile on, sir, what you said there, because this is something that the commander, when he talks about, wants to be perfectly clear on, in that as a combatant command, we are a demanding customer, as you said, and we drive requirements. We don't care what it's called. He looks at joint all domain command and control as a concept, same way that Nomad just articulated it. And we are service agnostic as to how it's being fielded. With that said, I would characterize General Van Herk's approach as two-pronged. On one hand, he is invigorating his staff to go out and lead abreast in the experimental side of things, moving fast with the stuff that Nomad is spearheading alongside other combatant commands. And you see that in that the last one that we did here just a couple short months ago had 4 combatant commands, and the one coming up here in the next week has 9. And we're looking to go bigger and bolder come May, June timeframe. So in that respect, on the innovation side, he's pushing hard on that approach. Secondarily, working the traditional avenues for capability development inside the Pentagon. We are working both on the concept side and with the actual programmatics. In fact, tomorrow, I'm actually briefing the Joint Staff J7, and immediately following the Joint Forces Integration Council, which is co-headed by the Joint Staff J7 and the Joint Staff J8, which is that seam in between concepts and capability development, expressing this vision that he has the same way that we've expressed it today. So we're pushing on all doors with the same message. Nomad, do you want to answer that other specific question?
No, I think you really kind of hit on it already. I mean, we are subordinating ourselves under several different joint staff agencies, whether it's the JADC2 CFT or the Joint Warfighting Concept, or how cyber is looking at their future concepts. I will say that our work with Cybercom is probably the most nascent, and we would really welcome any participation in guide and in our concepts as we were developing them out, whether it's from the joint staff or whether it's from Cybercom. I think there's a lot of work we can do to integrate cyber better into what we're doing. So we would definitely welcome that participation.
Okay, great. Let me, well, first, Admiral Cheever had to drop off, but he wanted me to mention that his sense is that universal quantum computing is going to be critical to our future. So I don't even know what that is, but I know I've seen a lot of emails from him lately about that. So there's some cool stuff out there. Next question is a pretty good one. So I'll provide some initial thoughts and then hand it over to Matt and Nomad. And it's with AI and ML being the basis for cyber operations, what is the vision or strategy to modernize data management and infrastructure to ingest all types and sizes, to continually feed ML models and result in increased probability and decreased time from data to decision, i.e. action taker. That is exactly where we are trying to go. And I'll state up front that I don't want to say we being DoD are our own worst enemy, but we've got some house cleaning to do with regards to how we manage and provide access to data, specifically with data standards and data governance. Data standards is not necessarily policy. That's just a challenge with regards to where the data is coming from and whether it's compatible with the systems we're trying to get it to after we quote unquote ingest it. I think we'll be a little bit faster in our success on addressing the data standards. The data's out there and the technology exists once we migrate it to the cloud to either reformat it or repurpose it for what we expect to use it for, based on all the technology that is rapidly developing and rapidly evolving from AI and ML. One of our biggest challenges is data governance. Whether it be security classification restrictions or some other semblance of proprietary data lying in a certain stovepipe is probably the second most commonly used word in the DoD lately, but locked away with the inability to access it and pull it into the cloud for utilization by the AI and the ML mechanisms and whatnot. So that is a policy decision. That is a policy problem that has been acknowledged internal to the DoD. That one is going to take some time to address and break loose. But the good news is that it's been acknowledged up to the highest levels of OSD, and we know internally to the Department of Defense that we've got some work to do specifically with regards to the governance of our data, because as we've been hammering home for the last hour and change, that all of this begins with access to the data. Once we get access to the data that we need, and we have the authorities and the permission to smartly, prudently pull it into the cloud environment while maintaining appropriate security measures, then all of this AI and ML technology can, for lack of a better term, and I'm going to oversimplify, basically work its magic to turn that data into information that is available to the decision makers 10 times faster than it was 2 years ago. And I think everybody acknowledges, certainly in the world of cyber, what used to take 10 years is now taking about 2 or less. So we've got to move quickly. We acknowledge the fact that in some areas we're not moving as quickly as we would prefer. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I will say the last note before I hand it back over to Matt and Nomad, it's important for folks to realize and acknowledge that the output from the AI and the ML, either algorithms or programs, are not actually going to be making any decisions. So early on, when we had these discussions about bringing AI and ML into the process for either expedited data to information transformation, there were some folks that had some allergic reactions, if you will, and built up some antibodies with regards to, we're not quite at the point where we want a quote unquote a machine or a computer making decisions. That's not where we're going with this, folks. We're basically using the computer and the machine learning to develop an array of options, a menu list of options for the actual decision makers to select from. And those options are based on empirical data and processes that we have developed and proven over time to be valid and accurate. So I'll pause there and hand it back over to Matt and Novin, unless if they have any other thoughts.
I'll only add one thing, because I'm fairly certain that I love watching you unmute and then have to mute again. It's so great. I think he's actually going to answer the technical question. I wanted to just pile on, really amplifying the commander, what I just described as his two-pronged approach. And the first part of that being the move fast, experimental, and what is the intent of that? Just as General Moga just said, the importance of an open data architecture with standards common across all that can be ingested. That right now is being undertaken as a priority by the cross-functional team for JADC2, headed by the Joint Staff J6. That action right there, the directing that to happen, is a direct byproduct of the effort that NOMAD led at the end of last year. When we did one of the advanced battle management system on-ramp number 2, that had multiple combatant commanders, service chiefs, member of Congress, Joint Staff J6. It's a lot of the top people that are informed and on this decision-making process, all in the same room for an outbrief at the end of what was a very long day. But what that did is it provided a forum for them to talk to each other and be able to talk about what the room is, the potential for this, but then what were the major hurdles and how they could overcome those as a group. So it brought them together, and that served as a catalyst for this type of change. General Van Herk is trying to maintain that same type of momentum through these guide experiments that NOMAD's doing. And the one that we have coming up that he just mentioned here next week, we have a 4-star level outbrief at that one that is designed to have not only all the different combatant commanders that are involved, but also the CAPE director, key members of the Joint Staff, OSD, et cetera, so that they can listen to those 4 stars, talk about this, where it needs to go, and what the potential is for the future in order to maintain that demand signal moving forward. With that, I hand it back over to you, Nomad.
So just two technical pile-ons to the question about infrastructure. So as Matt Eberhard just mentioned, when we did ABMS on-ramp number 2, we were pushing a lot of data through SIPRNet, and we had a lot of challenges with SIPRNet. That was probably the bane of our existence as we were doing this, because we were just the amount of data that we're pushing. We learned a couple things from that. One, that we need to think about the comm pipes that we currently have and leveraging new and emerging capabilities for not only like our brick and mortar facilities, but comm pipes that would get us to more austere locations. We've just talked about the Arctic in the past, and the advent of proliferated low Earth orbit, high bandwidth communications is just one example of a way that we can think about increasing that throughput capability. The second point would be that we're also thinking about, rather than having to, like, if we collect terabytes of satellite imagery that we're running AI and ML across, if we have to bring that terabyte, all those terabytes into our operating locations, that is a major constraint on bandwidth going in. So we're also looking at how could we use edge processing to put AI at the edge, at the point of the sensor, that then you could have a curated, whether it's a detection or a digitized piece of information about what the competitors are doing, and that can come off the sensor rather than the terabytes of imagery. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about to maybe think differently about architecture as we develop this out. Over.
Okay, we just got time for one more quick question. Is where do we see JADC2 being in a year from now? I'm assuming you're talking in NORAD NORTHCOM, but it's, as we've alluded to, it's much broader than NORAD NORTHCOM. It's really a global synchronization initiative. So from a NORAD NORTHCOM standpoint, I guess, where we see it being, or where we hope it is, if we have our way, is basically that slide that Nomad walked you through with regards to data, to information, to machines, to decision ready and decision superiority. We would like to have that operationalized. So we're still in the spiral development, but a year from now, we would like to have that ready for the combatant commander to use, our combatant commander to use, to base his decisions off of. And in addition to that, have the other combatant commands fully linked in, fully synchronized, to have a well-developed, common, global, integrated operational picture to get after not only intelligence and data sharing, but how do we work global force management? Knowing that we're going to be resource constrained from here on out as the Department of Defense, we've got to find a better way to work our global force management. And we can't do that unless we have better collaborative tools. And those better collaborative tools are going to be based and grounded in data and information, and then what we decide to do with it as quickly as possible. So parochially inside of NORAD NORTHCOM, we would like to have JADC2 or information dominance, all domain awareness, and decision superiority operationalized and internalized throughout the commands, plural. And then we'd also like to have solid synchronization and communication and collaboration with all of the other global geographic or functional combatant commands to really get us to where we need to go as a department. And I'll pause there and give Matt and Nomad a couple last words to pile on, because I know that the boss has some thoughts on this as well.
I actually think you summed that up quite nicely, sir. I think if I were to put words in his mouth, he would just say that the next fight, if and when it comes, is going to be won by those that can actually achieve information dominance, just as we described it here today. And that's not just at one combatant command, but you have to have a global perspective that is seamless across the combatant commands, but also with our allies. So whatever room that we're able to gain here in the next year, that has to be expanded multifold to be able to prosecute a fight that's going to incorporate folks across NATO, et cetera. So it's a tough road to hoe, but it's only through very innovative and leaning forward actions from the key players that we've been working with so far that's actually going to take place. And so we're full steam ahead. Nomad?
I complete agreement. The only thing I would add onto that is a future where even only 1 year from now, and this is orders of magnitude quicker than we've been able to move in the past, that we envision a future where a year from now, a competitor takes an action to try to advance their interests that are not in the interests of the U.S. and our allies, and that before that competitor actually takes that action, indications and warnings are pouring in to both NORAD and NORTHCOM, and as General Moga said, the other combatant commands. We can see the direction that they're going, and we can rapidly collaborate with systems that are already deployed to be able to come up with joint force deterrence options. We move out as a joint force before that competitor even decides to take their action, and they're left going, I thought I was going to make a decision to take an action on this front, and all of a sudden I see multiple dilemmas simultaneously. Let's just hold on for a little bit. Let's just wait. And that's exactly what we want. We want to deter them from moving out in ways that are not beneficial to the U.S., Canada, and our allies. So I think we could get to a future where in just a year we have systems that allow us to do that.
Okay, thanks. Last quick pile on, and then I think we're out of time. I'll hand it back out to the RMCS folks. Additionally, and probably one of the things that the DoD needs to work on going forward, and we didn't spend a whole lot of time talking about it in this forum, but we can't forget about our sensors throughout all the domains, whether it be submaritime, surface, land, air, space, and cyber. There's still work to be done on our sensor systems and our ecosystem of sensors, if you will, because those are the areas and those are the tools that we're really going to be relying to get a lot of our data to move through the rest of the chain to eventually end up in decision superiority. So that sensor piece is a much more complex and complicated and classified discussion. So I'll just leave it at that. So with that, thanks again for the invite. Really enjoyed the participation. Hopefully the audience and the folks either online or up at the Broadmoor got something out of it. And it is certainly beneficial for us, and any chance we get to share our message for Homeland Defense and continental defense moving forward, and the broad implications, and the fact that it is much bigger than just NORAD and NORTHCOM. It's a global challenge, and we need to continue our solid collaboration and lean on our industry partners, because let's be honest, a lot of this resident expertise does not lie inside of the Department of Defense, which is why our partnership is so critical. So with that, I'll pause and I'll hand it back. And once again, thanks for the opportunity. Really enjoyed it.
Well, thanks, sir. We do appreciate you and the panel sharing your insights with us today. And we know you're super busy over there at NORTHCOM, so especially appreciate you taking time out to be with us here today, and really did appreciate all your insights and interaction, question and answer session. So thanks again, and hopefully we'll see you here in future sessions too, years to follow. So thanks again. Folks, that's it for our structured session for the symposium today, but we know that one of the best things about this kind of activity is the interplay you get with some of the speakers and panelists outside of the formal speaking arrangements. So what we've done is we've set up a couple of happy hours after each day's program here for everyone in the audience to go ahead and log in to a Zoom session with the day's speakers and have a little more direct interaction and be able to feed some more questions if you didn't get something addressed or answered earlier today. So please scroll down just a little further on your agenda, and we'll be back here in just about 15 minutes at 1500 Mountain Time, and we'll see you for those happy hour sessions. So see you in a few.